thank you for joining me today for junk journal video number 3. So today we are going to be prepping our cover, prepping our signatures, and we are going to be binding or attaching or sewing, however you want to call it, our signatures into our book cover. This process is going to be mostly the same if you are just using a simple piece of scrapbook paper or anything else like an old envelope or paper bag, anything like that. You just won't have to do the prep work for a cover. So that is the first thing we're going to get into, and I did prep a couple of things. I did 3 out of the 4 signatures that we're going to be putting into this junk journal. We are going to talk about cover prep. So in the last video, when we removed the other text block, we do have this paper left over, and then there was a little bit of glue in here, so I did get the rest of that glue out to the best of my ability. If you remember, this is the one that it was a little thin, so we did nick the spine a tiny bit. It'll more than likely get covered anyway, so it's completely fine. So what we're going to do first is we're going to worry about our inside. Now, if you're planning on covering your entire outside in a fabric or something like that, I recommend doing that step prior to this. I am going to be putting a little bit of fabric on the front. I'm actually going to be putting some of this burlap, but I want the black around it, so I'm not worried about anything wrapping around or anything like that. That's for another video. But today we're going to focus on getting this inside stabilized and then getting our signatures inside. So I'm going to set this aside for just a second, and I'm going to pull out my paper that I've chosen. So for the inside of my junk journal, I am going to be using this. I think it's from the Thedosia Square paper pad from Hobby Lobby. It's just a thin, simple piece of 12 by 12 scrapbook paper. And then for the inside of the book, on the where it's currently white, and you don't have to do this. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But I really like these florals, and I wanted to put them inside, so that's gonna go right there. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and cut this paper. For your spine, obviously you want to cut your paper to the height of your inside pages that are already existing. So in my case, I believe that is 9 inches, I want to say, or it might even be 8.75. Let's just double check. 9 inches. And then mine from the spine out is going to be 6 inches, so that's what I will be cutting my scrapbook paper at to do that. So let's move this, and I'm going to grab my paper trimmer. I'm not going to get out the guillotine paper trimmer today. I'm just going to be a little simple. We're going to use my little Fiskars trimmer here. I think I've showed you guys this before. As always, anything that I can link, I will link below. I'm trying to decide what part of this paper I want to use. You're not going to see that much of the spine paper. It doesn't really matter. And because this book has a 1-inch spine on it, I recommend going out a little bit farther. If you're putting paper on the inside, you're going to cover it anyway. So for this one, I am going to do 4 inches, I think. Yeah, we're going to do 4 inches on this one because I did put a hole in it, and I want to make sure that we get that stabilized. So I'm going to cut this at 4 inches. Set that aside, and then I'm also going to cut it down to 9 inches, like I said. And while I have this trimmer out, I'm going to go ahead and cut my inside pages. So I'm going to cut this straight in half at 6 because I really like the bird and this little ticket. If you're curious about this, this is actually from the Tim Holtz Wallflower paper pack. I can't remember where I got mine. I think I actually had to order mine off of Amazon, which sucks, but that is where I got mine. So I just cut this directly in half at 6 inches, so they're going to be the correct width. And I'm just going to cut them down to 9 inches, making sure I'm cutting on the right side so I don't cut my pretty pattern. Okay, and my name is Sparrow. I'm not really going to go into why. It's been my nickname for a very, very long time, and I love all things birds. You guys might have seen, I do have a couple of tattoos that you might have seen that have birds on them. Alright, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to pull our cover back in here, and we want to put this inside of here to stabilize it here. So there's a couple of different options. You could use any glue you want. You could use a PVA glue. You could use tacky glue. This is just happens to be the clear gel. I actually really like to use spray adhesive for this because I don't have to wait for it to dry. If you do use a spray adhesive, make sure you're using it in a well ventilated area. This stuff stinks. I mean, really stinks. Also, I recommend covering up your workspace. Let me grab a piece of scrap paper that I can put underneath. Yes, I know this is a cutting mat. Shouldn't be worried about it, but cutting mats are very expensive and I don't particularly want to ruin my very large cutting mat. So I said a piece of paper. This is actually a piece of poster board that I had laying around, but it will do the job the same, and it'll actually probably make it a little bit easier for you guys to see what I'm doing. I will have to switch back, but for now, we'll just do that. So if you are using regular glue, you just want to put it in here and kind of spread it out a little bit. If you're using the spray adhesive, like I said, do so with proper ventilation, etc. And because the spray adhesive can kind of go all over the place, I like to just take a scrap piece of paper, which I just cut off of the other ones, and I kind of cover up what I don't want to spray. So I'm going to line this up here at the top where I don't want it to go over top of. And then I'm going to do the same thing down here at the bottom. And just make sure with the spray adhesive you get it all in there. And it's okay if it splashes over on the book cover because, like I said, we're going to be covering that as well. Alright, now that my hands are substantially sticky, and the really great thing about the spray adhesive is that it can be temporary or it can be permanent. So for temporary, you let it dry for 3 to 5 minutes, and then you can put it on. And if you want it to be permanent, like we do, obviously, we spray it and then we go ahead and stick it down. So I am just going to take my paper and line it up down here at the bottom. And this stuff is super sticky, so be ready for that. I had it upside down, sorry guys. And what I'm doing is kind of just holding the book flat because it wants to kind of curl up because of the spine. And I cut my paper a little bit too long. I'm okay with it. And then after you have it in, you really want to make sure that you work this into the spine. If you have something like a bone folder or something like that, that would be preferable. I have one, but I'm not exactly sure where I put it. So I am just going to use my ruler. And you just want to really make sure you work it down in the creases here, the inside of the spine. Fold your book open and run it through there again on both sides. You just want to make sure you have a really secure bond. So if you're looking at the bottom of mine right here, you can see that it's kind of sticking up a little bit. That means it is not pushed in well enough. Okay. Alright, and if my nails look a little bit funny on this hand, guys, it's because I did spray it with that craft bond. This is washable. It'll come off. Just a little bit of a soap and elbow grease and we'll get it off. Alright, so now that we have our spine in, and notice that mine is not perfectly aligned, that is why I recommend doing a little bit of a bigger section. We're going to go ahead and do the inside papers. Like I said, I like to do inside papers. You do not have to. This step is optional. I like to do this before I put in my signatures though, because once you put your signatures in, it gets a little more difficult. reinforce the spine here. You can see now that it's not floppy anymore like it was in the beginning. It'll actually stay pretty straight. And we've put our inside paper in. Again, both steps are optional. Another option for the spine, if you don't really care, you could do something as simple as duct tape or gaffeta tape or anything like that. You could definitely do that. You just want to put something here to reinforce the spine, especially on newer books because they are a lot thinner. The next thing I'm going to do is get our signatures together. So let me clean all of this up and set it aside to let it dry, and I'll be right back with you guys. I'm going to keep this pretty simple. There is a lot more you could do with your signatures, like putting in envelopes and single pages, etc. There's a ton of videos on YouTube. If you guys are interested in seeing me do one, just leave me a comment down below and I can definitely arrange that. So I did go ahead and prepare 3 signatures here, and I'll give you a little bit of a flip through just so you can kind of see what I've done. So there's some full-size sheets here, and mine are 5.5 inches wide, and that is just because the cover that I am using is 6 inches, and I like to leave a little bit of space around it so that it's not sticking out over the edge, because I like my pages uneven. If you're doing a junk journal that is a little bit more polished and not as aged, by all means, you don't have to make it shorter. You can make it exact if you want to. For mine, I have roughly 12 pages in each of the signatures, and I have folded them all to the 5.5 point. So I didn't cut the paper to start out with. I'll show you what I mean in just a second. But you can kind of see here, I've got a little bit of, there's another bird, a little bit of alternating on big sheets and small sheets and different colors. Here's one of the pages from the actual book that we're using to make this. Another one. There's a little bit of that Tim Holtz wallpaper that I was telling you guys about. Here's another book page and some vellum. And that is it for this one. So that's the idea. Just kind of however you want to put your pages together. This is a completely custom process. So I'll show you how I get my signatures ready, and this is just like a pretty basic way of doing it. There's nothing crazy to it. So I mentioned in, I want to say it was the first, yeah, in the first video when we were talking about our papers and our supplies, most of mine are just 8.5 by 11 sheets folded in half, and that actually gives me the perfect size for mine. So I do have this piece of coffee stained vellum that I showed you guys. I've got a couple book pages, another piece of that Tim Holtz wallpaper, and then a bunch of various other ones. This is the paper from the last video when we were talking about covers. So the first thing I'm going to do, all of these are fine as far as height, but yeah. So all of these are actually fine, and I don't know why this is in here. It's not supposed to be, except for this one and this one. So I am going to quickly just trim those down so that we don't have to fight that. We will be trimming again, but for now, the only thing I want you to worry about is your height. So I mentioned my book, 8.5 by 11 sheet folded in half, meaning that we want our pages to be 8.5. I just do that for ease because the next step, so this is what I do. This is not what you have to do. This is not how everybody does it. This is what I do because it makes the process simpler for me. This is a scoreboard. This one is by Elk Tools. I got this at Hobby Lobby. And I actually lost the scoring tool that goes with it, so I have my lovely scoring tool from my Cricut here. And what I do is I don't worry about the order of the pages or anything. All I worry about is the orientation that I want them to be in my junk journal. So if I want it to be folded this way on the scoring board, I'm going to score the opposite side. So this is an 11-inch piece, so I'm going to score it at 5.5 and then fold it over. If you don't have a scoreboard, you don't have to have one at all, but if you do have one, it makes it easier. If you don't have a scoreboard, you can simply just fold the pages. So this one is still 12 inches long. All we did was trim the height. So we're just going to do it in half. The other option you have, and since this is the only one, we have two like this. For this one, I'll show you a simple way, and then I'll show you what you can do. This one we already folded this one in the last video, so we're not going to do it on this one. I'm going to set this one to the side because it's already folded, and I'll show you on this one. So like I said, my pages are 5.5 wide. So if I wanted to score this exactly where my 5.5 inch mark was going to be, it would give me, you know, a little bit of an overhang because this is a 12-inch piece. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do it at 5. Now that's going to make this page a little bit short, but I'll show you why. Okay, so if we score it at 5, this page is going to be like this, and you see that we have this section hanging off here. And what I like to do, again, optional, but it's fun to add it in. What I like to do is go ahead, instead of cutting this section off, I'm going to go ahead and score it at 5 as well. So now we have a little fold over inside. So this is going to be a little bit thinner, so let me get, here's my vellum again. You guys can see it. This is the 5.5 and this is at 5. But inside of this one, we have this little pocket type area here. And what I'll actually do is tack this down, either at the bottom or on both sides, and it'll just give us a little tuck spot without all the hassle. That vellum is fine. Again, all you want to do is make sure you know which way you want it to fold. So if you want this to be on the inside, let's say that we do this time. We want this to be on the inside. This is an 8-inch piece, so we're going to score it at 4 inches. And that's it. Whichever way the paper is facing, when you score it, that's going to be the inside fold. So I'm going to go ahead and score and fold the rest of these, and I will be right back with you. Now that we have all of our papers scored and folded, or just folded, however way you are doing it, I recommend, again, a bone folder, but if you cannot find your bone folder like me, or you do not own one, a ruler will do the job just fine. And what we're going to do is we're just going to run over all of these creases that we made just to kind of crispen them up. You want to do is you want to think about how you want each signature to look. So all of these I've kind of gone through and set up, and I've just kind of alternated short pages with big pages, specialty papers with regular paper, and so on and so forth. So we're going to kind of do the same thing with this signature here. The only thing I do recommend is when you have a lot of these short pages in the book, set them aside. I'm going to take all of these away for a second. Set your shorter pages aside because you want to make sure you stagger them, because if you don't stagger them, you're going to have a lot of bulk right in the middle of your signature, and you don't want that. It's going to make it harder to put together. So I'm going to kind of just alternate my pages here. Like, I'm going to take this one that is coffee stain on one side and a pattern on the other side, and I'm going to put, nope, not that one. Here we go. I'm going to put a regular piece of coffee stain paper on the other side with this side up because I like it like that. And yes, this sheet is a lot shorter. It is okay. I will show you guys why. And then I will take this double-sided here. I'll take this piece of vellum that I showed you in the first video with a printable on it. And I want this to be on the outside. Yeah, this way. And then we'll put these pretty roses behind it. Let's see. You can't really see it with the roses behind it. How about this? That's better. You're just kind of going to stack your pages up. So you just want to do it in alternating ways. There's no perfect science to it. It's all about your preference and how you want it to look. And if you're using something like vellum, I recommend you make sure it's just not your middle page, because this is where we're going to be sewing and you don't want to rip it. All right, so now that we have all of our larger sheets together, we can pull in our little half sheets and quarter sheets and book pages, etc. And we can find little spots for them in here. So what I do is I kind of flip through it as if it were a book already, and I just see where I would like one to go. So I'm going to put this book page here at the bottom of this one. And I'm going to grab this handmade paper and I'm going to put it more towards the top. Again, we just want to stagger them. I'm going to put this little interesting piece of wallpaper that we have from the Tim Holtz collection here. And I'm going to put that one towards the middle. So you see what I'm doing. I'm just kind of staggering the pages a little bit. And I don't really like those patterns right next to each other, so I'm going to grab the other book page that I have. And I kind of like this side of it better. Yeah. And because this one's kind of straight at the top, that's where I'm going to put this one. So we still have this matte piece left. Don't feel like you have to use everything that you prepare for your junk journal, but I kind of do want it in here. Let me just flip through one more time and see how it looks. So we've got a little one there, big one there. I say we should put it right here, because this is one of our short pages, so this will stick out a little bit, and that'll be kind of cool. I'm going to put that one in the middle-ish. It doesn't have to be perfect. All right, now that we have everything that we want in our signature together, we need to open our signature up to the middle. And this part gets kind of tricky, but this is really, really important if you want straight pages. And you really just want to make sure that you are pushing all of your pages as tightly as you can to the inside. That way, if we cut them, that's actually how they're going to sit in the journal. Okay. And I would really recommend putting this in a book press or something heavy overnight to kind of keep it a little bit flatter. It would also be easier to sew together. But for the purposes of this video, I will not. Then you want to clip your pages together where they're at. These are like some jumbo paper clips I got at Hobby Lobby, and I like to use them when making signatures. You could also just use binder clips or something like that if that's what you have. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to trim to size now. So this is why we didn't trim to size earlier. It's just going to make your pages a lot more even by doing it now. And if you have one of the guillotine paper cutters that could handle this thickness, you could definitely use that. Mine, and you're just going to run your trimmer, or your trimmer, you guys. You're just going to run your rotary cutter along the edge, whatever straight edge you're using, whether it be a ruler or another book, anything like that. And because this paper has been coffee dyed, it is a little bit wrinkly, so it's going to fight me a little bit. For this junk journal, I don't want a finished look. I don't want it to be all pretty. So I'm actually 100% okay with that. I can show you in the other signatures. There's a couple of them that are actually like ripped and stuff, but you're just going to keep cutting. And you do have to apply a lot of pressure, so if your hands are not super strong, you may need to have somebody help you do this, or maybe use one of those guillotine cutters. It's up to you. And don't use your sewing rotary cutter. This is the one I use for this, because it will go through a blade quicker than you can imagine. We are almost through here. Looks like we're just nicking the paper more than anything at this point. I'm gonna be a little gutsy. Pull some of this out of the way. Just some little stragglers, and of course I still have that spray adhesive on my hand, so things want to stick to me. I'm gonna be a little bit gutsy, and I'm gonna go without the straight edge, and that's just because, like I said, I don't want a perfectly straight edge. Sorry for my head, you guys. I didn't realize I was in it again. So we just trimmed that, and now you can see it's a flat edge, so it's not gonna, if this is not your cup of tea and you want it rougher than this, go for it. Okay, so now we have all of our signatures prepared and we have our book cover prepared. What comes next? Well, we're going to put them together. That is what's next. So I'm going to pull these back off of here. And like I mentioned, would be a little bit easier to work with if you were able to press it even like underneath your mattress or something, just for like a day. It would make it a lot easier to work with. These three I actually did press for just a few hours though, so they could definitely be flatter. What I will be doing before next week's video is I will put, once we get everything in here, I will put the whole book in a book press. So if it looks a little bit flatter next week, that is going to be why. So I am going to show you what I consider the simplest method for doing something like this. And a couple things you're going to need. You're going to need some kind of thread. This is actual bookbinding thread. It is a wax linen thread. Like I said, I do make other journals, so I have this on hand always. And then you're going to need a needle that is appropriate to the thread that you're using, whether it be the wax thread or it be something like embroidery thread or even sewing thread. Any thread will work as long as you have an appropriate needle. You should be fine. Look at all this stuff that's sticking to me now. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do, I'm going to grab a pencil. And I made this before we started the video just to kind of give you guys an idea. I always recommend having a template because you don't want your pages to end up all wonky. The best way to have it end up wonky is by not using a template. So this is my template. We have 4 signatures. So we need to mark where our signatures are going to go. And you see that on this template, I'll turn it the other way. That might make it a little bit easier for us. So on my template here, I did mark the top so that I could have it that way. Again, our spine on this book is 1 inch. So you just want to see where your spine starts, which mine is right here. It's definitely a little bit off. And because we have 4 signatures and 1 inch, obviously we're going to be doing one every 1/4 inch. So I'm just going to mark that in pencil down here at the bottom. So after you figure out where on your particular spine for the book you're using, or if you're just using paper, there's not much you really need to do there. Once you figure out where you want everything to go, you're going to take your template and you are going to mark your holes for the entire thing. Now this template here is the size of my signatures. It's not the size of the book, as you can see, so you want to make sure you get this lined up. And we're just going to leave, because our signatures are 8.5 inches, even though our book cover is 9 inches tall, we are going to leave about a 1/4 inch on each side. And if you guys hear any noise in the background, I am really, really sorry. It is my kitten, and he has found something to play with. So we're just going to take our pencil, or you can use a Sharpie if you prefer. I like to use pencil so that I can erase it after I poke the holes. This part's a little bit tedious, but it's totally worth it. So on mine you can see where I use Sharpie to mark it on here. So I'm just going to follow where I wanted them. And just make sure that you keep your top at the top. So you don't want to flip it, because when you mark your template or whenever you do your measurements, you may not get it perfect. And if you don't do this perfect, your lines are going to be off. It's not a huge deal for your spine because it's going to be really apparent to you. But when it comes to poking the holes in your signatures, you're going to notice. Alright. With my jabbering done, let me go ahead and mark the next section here. Alright, so I'm not even sure if you guys can completely see that, but we just have our marks on the spine. And the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to actually poke these holes out using something like an awl, or I have a Tim Holtz craft pick. I just call it my pokey thing. And you're going to poke your holes here. So all you're going to do is exactly how it sounds. Just make sure you don't poke them on this bottom where you marked everything's going to go. So there's not going to be a signature there. You're just going to line it up and poke it through. And I like to move mine around a little bit because I am using book thread and it is a little bit thicker. Do it for all of your holes. You guys might be able to see a little bit better than the pencil. And I mean, no, they're not perfectly straight. That's not going to make a huge difference. What makes a huge difference is if your hole, say this hole's here and this hole's like here. That's going to make a huge difference. Now we have all of our holes poked in our spine. I'm going to set this aside and we're going to pull in our signatures. And this is where the template comes real handy. When we go to do our signatures, it's going to be a little bit different, and I'll show you on one of these because they're a little bit flatter. It's going to make it a little bit easier. What you're going to do is you're going to open your signature up to the middle, and you want to make sure that you still keep your creases tight and all together. And what I do, again, with these jumbo clips, I just kind of clip my pages together like that. I have also used these if it's something really thick. I don't really like them because I don't like to lay as flat. So once you have everything pinned or clipped or however you're doing it together, you just want to make sure, again, that everything is tight like it is here. And we are going to use our template once again. So this time it's a little bit different though. So we're going to actually open our template back up like this. I'm going to fold it this direction. And what I do is I put it in the middle, making sure it is tight as well. And then I take another clip and I clip my template make sure that's straight. I clip my template to my signature. And I do this just because this way it's not going to move around on me. And with the signatures, I actually don't mark them. You can if you want to. I just go straight in with either an awl or a craft pick like I mentioned and do it. And I like to fold it up just a little bit like that because we want to make sure everything stays in line. So I'm going to try and show you guys this without messing it up. So I'm just going to take my craft pick and I'm actually going to extend it a little bit more like that. I'm just going to go to my first hole here and stab straight down. And then you can see that it came out on the other side. You might not be able to see that on camera, I'm sorry. So I'm just going to do that for all 4 holes. Okay, so now that we have poked all 4 of our holes, I'm not even sure if you guys can see them, but they are on the outside edge here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take the template back off of it because we're going to need it to do these as well. But remember what the top is. If you do this and then flip it, like I said, it's going to act a little strange in your book. So what I like to do is I take one of the clips off, but I leave the other one on so I keep everything lined up the same way. And I just take that signature and I lay it the way it's supposed to be. I just lay it down. I'll show you because this is out of frame. I just lay it down just like that. And I set it aside and I don't touch it again until I'm ready to put everything together. Just because you are putting the holes in them in this order does not mean this is the order you have to put them in your book. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and poke the rest of the holes in each signature, and then we will come back and talk about actually binding them. I'm not sure if you guys could see that or not because I know I did go out of frame a little bit on a couple of them there. But you're going to do the same process for all 4 of your signatures, or however many signatures you have in your junk journal. And I don't know if you saw it or not, but I did have a lot of trouble with this last signature. And like I said, that is because it was not pressed. So it was a little tougher to make sure everything was lined up properly. But we got it done, so it's okay. Like I said, you want to make sure you keep these in the correct orientation, not necessarily order, but you want to make sure the top stays the top after you have used your craft pick or your awl and poked your holes. So you can kind of, I think you guys can see them. You can see here on the spine. I'll focus on that. Not really sure what it's focusing on besides the books here. But you can see here on the spine, you can see your holes going straight across. So the next thing you need to do is you need to determine the order that you want them to go into your journal in. So I've got 2 kind of dark ones and 2 light, so I'm just going to alternate those. And I really wanted this one to be near the front of the journal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this one, then this one, then this one, and then this one. And again, personal preference. So this looks a little big, and that's because that one was not pressed. But if we stick it inside of the journal here, even though that looks pretty large, when it's pressed, it's actually going to fit pretty good. So I'll show you guys next week once we do have it pressed. And of course, it is going to get thicker if you're using it and putting like more ephemera and pictures and things like that in it. It is going to get thicker, but we will be working on a closure next week as well. So let's go ahead and start binding these. All right, so we are going to go ahead and start sewing our signatures in now that we know our order. And I'm going to, which one do I want to do first? I think I'm going to start with have them out of order. Just got them in order and then I got them out of order. I'm going to actually start with the back because I feel like it's going to be a little bit easier to show you guys. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to sew through the second hole. So if you have 3 holes, it'll be the middle hole. If you have 4 holes, it could be either of these 2. And you want to go from the inside of your signature. If you can, it's a little hard to show on camera. Usually I work a lot closer to it. So I'm going to kind of do the same thing I did when I punched my holes so that I can get everything lined up. So if you're having a hard time finding it, like getting your needle through the hole, you don't want to poke extra holes. First of all, make sure that you are lined up properly. And because this is the one where the pages are still kind of crinkled from being dyed, it's a little bit harder. So I'm going to actually go page by page. So I'm going to find my first hole and I'm going to stick it through, and I'm going to continue with that process. Once you get your first hole, maybe your second hole through, it gets a lot easier. But instead of just trying to shove it through, you can just do it this way as well. You can just kind of flip your pages. It does take a little bit longer, but it's worth it to have a nicer finish on your journal. Unless you're looking for that rough finish. If you're looking for that rough finish, by all means, do you. This one's a little hard to see on. Lovely patterned paper though. We're just going to keep flipping through our pages and making sure, so you can see my needle right here. I'm just lining that up in the pre-existing holes that we punched. And I just backed out a little bit, so it just takes a little bit of patience. Once you get this first hole, maybe the first hole and then going back in one hole, it'll get a lot easier. So now you can see we've walked through all the pages and we are to the outside. You might not be able to see it. There you go. So there's our needle coming through, and we're just going to pull that all the way through and leave a little bit of a tail. So I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail here, and you want to make sure that you do not pull that all the way through because we're going to use this to secure our signature at the end. Like I said, we are going to be starting in the back here. So we're going to go in the corresponding hole on our spine, which is right here. And we are going to go to the outside of our book. You don't get caught. Okay. The outside of our book, just make sure when you pull that through, you don't lose your tail. I like to leave my tail sticking out of the signature here so that I can see it. And then the next thing we're going to do is we are going to go up to the next hole. So right here, we're just going to go back inside our book cover. And you don't have to worry about pulling this too tight. We can secure it a little bit tighter in a minute. Because this signature is so tricky, it's actually pretty good for me to show you guys on because I kind of have to go slow with it. So then we're going to take our needle and we're going to go back into our signature with the same corresponding hole. So in this case, it is the second hole. And I'm going to do that same process with walking it through the page. Walk through all of our pages 5 million years later, and we're just going to wiggle and pull our needle through. So at this point, what I suggest is pull your signature a little tight, because if you've gone out and you've come in, that's all you've done. So pull your signature tight, close it up, and check out where it's landing on your spine. So like I said, with this one, because the pages are 8.5 instead of 9, we want to make sure there's about 1/4 of an inch on either side, which there is. So this one is lined up perfectly. So we're going to do the same thing. Now that we've come from the outside to the inside, we are going to go back to the outside. So we are going to just run back through. When you're doing this, if you have like the little half sheets like this piece of wallpaper, just make sure you're aware of those, because you want to make sure that you grab them when you're feeding through. So be aware of what section actually involves it. Like, see, this one doesn't have this one either, but the other 2 sections did. So just be aware of what you're doing. And we are almost back to the outside. I'm just walking it through because this one is giving me a little bit of trouble. Probably won't be as difficult with the other ones, but this one's giving me a little bit of trouble simply because the pages are crinkly and they keep wanting to misalign. So, go back out through the inside to the outside, just like we did in the beginning. You can kind of see we have a little stitch here. That is what you want. And we're going to go out the spine again, just like we did before, to the corresponding hole. So that is our top hole here. I'm going to pull that out. Then we are going to start making our way back down. So now that we've gone here, we are going to go back into the second hole that we came out of previously. And at this point, if this is tight from you checking it, loosen it a little bit. You don't want it in your way. If you are using something like embroidery thread, be super careful when you're going back through something that you've already gone through, because if you split it, your thread could break. With the wax thread, it's not as serious because it is wax, it is secured together. So I'm going to open this back up and I am going to feed it back through my second hole here. Alright, now here's our needle back into the inside again, and we're going to wiggle it back in. Now Now, when you get to this point, it does get a little bit more difficult because if you don't start pulling these tight, you're going to run into some issues, especially with the wax thread. Don't pull too hard, because if you pull too hard, you're going to end up with a mess. So I'm just going to pull it tight like that, and we're going to leave it like that. So the next thing here is we have our little tail. We want to kind of pull that up and out of the way because we're going to go through this hole that we originally started on. We're going to go through it next, and we are going to go back to the outside and back out the hole that we started with on the outside as well, right here. And you see what I mean, like once you start getting it in there, it gets a little bit easier. So we're going to pull that through to the outside, and I do see a little bit of slack here. So I am going to try and tighten that up before I move on. Because if there's a lot of slack, your signature will be quite loose. We don't want signatures falling out. That's better. All right. And then we're going to finish it up here just by going into our last hole. It's the only hole that we haven't been into just yet. So we're going to go in our last hole here, back to the inside. I'm going to pull my middle open again. And this one should be pretty lined up because we've gone through 3 of them already. Again, it may not be the case with this signature because we didn't press it. I don't know how many times I can say that. I really, really recommend that if you stain your paper or use dye on your paper or something like that, I recommend pressing it. Sounds like a fancy term. It's not. Stick it under your mattress for a day, you know. Take a chill pill, come back to it in a day. Or, I don't know, make your signatures, stick it under your mattress, go to bed. Next morning you can put it together. Alright, so now that we have made it through, we are just going to pull that out, and we are going to adjust, we're going to adjust all of our stitches. So we just want to make sure that everything is tight. The way that I do that is from the inside. So I just kind of pull, 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 and pull. So now you can see that these are tight here, and if we open to the outside, they are tight along this edge as well. So now that we have that done, the last thing that we need to do is just to tie a knot on the inside here to secure it all together. And with this, you want to make sure, again, it is tight because you don't want a bunch of slack. If there is a bunch of slack, your signatures are going to be sliding around. I find that with the wax thread, it makes it a little bit easier because the wax thread does want to stick to itself. So it makes it a little easier to get tighter knots. What's not easy is kind of doing it one hand. Okay, here we go. So now that we have that done, you can leave these as long or as short as you would like to. I typically just do about an inch like that. You could trim them even less if you want to. And what I like to do is I take my tail and I kind of wrap them. Just for neatness sake. Again, optional. I just like to do. Okay, so now that we have walked through that, I am going to close this up and show you guys just how it looks in the journal. So you can see we've got about ½ inch on the top and the bottom, and then, or I'm sorry, ¼ inch on the top and the bottom, and then that ½ inch here because it is 6 inches wide. That's what happens. It's okay. I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of our signatures in, and then I'll just fast forward through that so you guys can still see it, and then I will come back and we will chit chat a little bit more. All right, let me take everything off of here, and let's talk about it. Let's talk about this ginormous thing. So you can see it's definitely popping up. Again, that's because everything wasn't pressed. I'm sure you guys could see even in this sped up version, I did have a lot of trouble on some of the signatures. And that's just because they are, I mean, this is a good example. They just are curling and things like that. But that is nothing a good press can't fix. And I did like kind of mention like with my hands in the video. You guys can see here at the top, this is a little bit taller, and this is just taller because I left it taller. I didn't cut it down to the 8.5 inches. I kind of liked it sticking up. So that is what our junk journal is looking like so far. And next week we are going to talk about closures. It is something that I feel like is important in a junk journal, even if you're doing a junk journal with pretty, like, just pretty pages that have not been stained in any way or anything like that. Over time, as you fill it, it is still going to pop open. So I feel like closures are super important. So that's what we're going to be doing next week, along with decorating our cover. We are pretty close to being done with this junk journal. Like I said, there are other versions, and I'm going to make them with you guys as well. So I'll just give you a little overview of what the spine looks like. It's kind of cool how it's on top of the writing. As I mentioned though, you can cover this if you want to. And all of your signatures are now back in the book. So it kind of looks like the book before we tore it apart. And I don't know, I might take those top ones off. I haven't decided yet. If I do anything, it would just be tear them down a little bit. So I'm going to put this in the book press for next week, and we will talk about closures and everything like that. If you guys have any questions about getting your signatures together or binding your book, or if you have any other questions related to junk journal or planning anything at all, feel free to leave them in the comments or send me an Instagram direct message. I will put my Instagram right here. It is at Sparrow Design Paper Company. And that is going to be it for today, you guys. Thanks for coming by and crafting with me. And I will see you guys same time next week. Bye.